I am going camping in a farm field because I'm going to a folk festival tomorrow. I'll be sleeping out in a pasture in a tent with an air mattress and a sleeping bag. Does that alarm you? You look alarmed, Lionel.
Why do you need both an air mattress and a sleeping bag?
Well, I don't want to sleep on the hard ground. I want a little
Oh,
cushion.
oh, you precious little snowflake. No,
Uh,
God forbid.
I'm
God,
a feeble old man now. I'm a
oh, you're
submerging
not.
artist. Anyway,
Please.
we have a guest today. We have Julian Fisher. Julian Fisher was an American Studies major at Yale, studied with American documentary photographer Walker Evans, was a freelance photojournalist at Time, Newsweek, Life, New York Times, Atlantic, and subsequently went to medical school, Johns Hopkins Medical School, and then joined the Harvard Neurology faculty, returning part-time a decade ago to photography. Julian has released a number of photojournals. I actually run the website that it is all compiled upon, and there's just a ton of really interesting images there from his travels around the world, but also pieces about kind of the changing state of America. The first one was Trapped in the Middle, the effect of inequality on the middle class in America, and later Faded Glory. And then the one that we will be talking about today, which is Past is Future Climate Change and the Revival of Upstate New York. So these read like a big coffee table book, except that they are online. And I found this one particularly fascinating because uh, Lionel has moved recently from Texas to Syracuse, New York. And I've always found upstate New York, especially that run between Albany and Buffalo, to be kind of mysterious. And Julian has kind of found a way in. So, welcome, Julian Fisher. I'm glad to have you here. And maybe you can shed some light on what's going on in upstate New York.
Well, it started when I was born in Buffalo, in fact,
Ah,
and grew up there until I was 18. Went off to college, and at the time, Buffalo was in its decline, and it was the beginning of a long decline. There were no more grain mills. The Lakers that these long, low slung ships that brought the grain to be milled in Buffalo, which was one of the great milling centers of the world,
mm,
uh, had ended, and these big they were almost tombstones. The milling centers along the harbor. So that's and then there was a steel plant, Bethlehem Steel, that was
yeah.
in decline. Everybody knew that it was just a matter of time till it closed. And when it closed, suddenly the unemployment rate after I'd left, the unemployment rate went up from 3 or 4% in the city to something like 17% overnight. Oops.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm,
and so this is what I left behind when I came east to New Haven. And then I ended up, as part of my training, coming back to Rochester back in the 70s, mid 70s, and I saw the second phase of decline. I mean, it's really very depressing
mm,
because the major industries that drove Rochester to greatness were fading or had disappeared.
right.
Xerox was gone. Kodak was busy shooting itself in the foot, and ultimately did a great job of it. And poor Rochester. And then I came back again to the East Coast after many more moves, and then I had this moment of just amazement about 3 years ago when I was driving from Boston through Albany down to Ithaca to open an exhibit of my work at the Mann University Library at Cornell. And the scenery was just so gorgeous. The farms, this was April, the farms couldn't have been greener and more productive. And I wonder, and then driving into Ithaca, I was really struck by this university, Cornell, that had a
Mm-hmm.
campus, but it didn't have a campus. The campus was sprawling out long, many, many minutes before you ever got anywhere near Ithaca. There were new buildings, this, that, and the other, Center for something, Cornell. And I
Mm.
thought, this is pretty impressive. I mean, Cornell was a big university. This is a bigger university. So then I came home after that trip and remembered that I'd read a book. I bought a book back in 1970s, early 70s, that had come out by Edmund Wilson, who was a very well-known then literary critic, irascible as hell, and a
Mm-hmm.
great writer. And he wrote this elegant elegy to the decline of upstate New York. He had a summer home that became a more year-round. It's a family home that he took over in Talcottville. And
Mm.
Talcottville is nowhere. Nobody knows where Talcottville is. I've asked many people in upstate, do you know where Talcott? No. Well, it's about 30, 40 minutes drive north of Utica. It's off the main route to Old Forge and the Adirondacks, which is another story. So I reread this book, and it was a wonderful, whimsical tale of his going there and wandering around and exploring upstate and exploring all of upstate. I mean, a large part of it was up toward the Adirondacks, but also places like Utica, where he went shopping, Syracuse, and west. Down to was the southwest corner, Lilydale, which was the spiritualist community.
Hmm.
This is just one of the many aspects of Edmund Wilson that is, he loved to look for eccentricity, and he did. He found it. He went off with some of his neighbors in his neighborhood north up into the Adirondack foothills to Sodom. He wanted to see what Sodom was like. He'd heard about a town called Sodom.
Wait, can
You
I
know,
stop you for a second? Because you get to Sodom very early in the we call it a slideshow for now.
yeah,
And I think it just struck me. I mean, as I was assembling this, I wasn't really looking, and then I went back and I read and I looked at the pictures, and that one picture of the Sodom schoolhouse,
yeah.
there is so. I mean, they could
Well,
have named it. They could have given it a name, the Mary Beth,
they didn't do
Murphy
that
School.
in those
No,
days. They didn't
no,
do it. Only now do we give names to schools, but back then it was in Sodom, so you call it the Sodom Elementary School.
yeah,
And the wonderful thing about Sodom is that it's where two little roads cross.
yeah.
This is like Talcottville. It's less than if you blink. There's one of the roads that comes into the point is called Back to Sodom.
Right, right. That's the name of the road.
And
Is the
so,
other one pulled away from Sodom?
right. So his thought was, well,
Get me from.
If there's a Sodom, there has to be a
Be a
Gomorrah.
Gomorrah.
Well, wrong.
Where the hell's Gomorrah?
There's no Gomorrah in New York State. I've looked, and there is none. However, he heard from some of his neighbors that there was a real Sodom. The real Sodom in New York State was where?
Ithaca.
Ithaca,
Right.
because you knew that because
Oh, I read your presentation.
Yeah,
Ithaca's original name was Sodom.
and the reason is that after the war, the vets came back on their GI Bill and went to. There's more to this, but they went. This is what he said. He reported. He was told they went to Cornell on the GI Bill, and they cut up the town, so they turned it into Sodom. There are two parts of this story, so let me jump to the interesting historical part. Ithaca was originally named Sodom legally. They changed the name in the early 1800s from Sodom to Ithaca. But so there, as part of my later peregrinations, wanders to photograph all this stuff, I drove again to Ithaca, pulled in the evening, walked past on the pedestrian mall, walked past into the center of town, past the State Theater, which is a gorgeous restored theater with a wonderful marquee, also restored. And I stopped dead in my tracks. Right next to it was an adult bookstore with a sign flashing adult bookstore. So we have Sodom today.
Sodom lives on.
Sodom
Sodom,
and higher education. Yes.
right. So this was, I realized I needed to look into more of what was happening in Upstate, and there was a lot happening in Upstate. I began to read more. Um, and I'd read about or heard about when I went to find Talcottville, which I did, um, and found his house, Edmund Wilson's house. It's still there. It was sold to. It's currently owned by a writer from Brooklyn. Um, and it's the only stone house in the entire area. It was a very productive farm area, and it's still productive. But I drove past a big plant, a big building, a massive building. What was it? Well, it's a chip fab plant
Mm.
in the middle of a field about 15 minutes north of Utica. Massive, multi-billion-dollar chip fab plant that's built by a company from North Carolina that was thinking about expanding. This is part of the story. The underlying story that I've discovered is they were going to expand an older chip fab plant in Research Triangle Park area, and they decided that was crazy because they had another plant, but this one they weren't going to be bothered with. So instead, they decided to move to upstate New York. Why?
Water.
Why on earth?
Yeah.
Well, two things. It's partly water, and it's partly power.
Yep.
The power comes from Quebec Hydro, comes across the border, and it's cheap. And the water is in the ground and in the Great Lakes, and it's endless. You can drill down if you want to underneath Marcy, New York. You can drill down to China, and you'll have water all the way in the limestone. I mean, you can connect to the AI in China now, but that's not what the plan is. But so there was this plant in the middle of nowhere, and I'd also noticed as I had driven, and I hadn't paid attention to this, but I looked it up. What was this massive white multi-building complex on Interstate 90 as you drive through Albany on your way west? And they were expanding it, and there were massive cranes. This is 3 years ago. There were massive cranes. I looked it up. It's the Nanotech Center. What is the Nanotech Center? Well, it just happens to be affiliated with the State University of New York at Albany. And it was a $1.2 billion facility that was too small, so they're building more. And it is the largest chip fab research facility in the world outside of Taiwan. Oh, okay. And then there was this little announcement, of course, that was made that Micron was going to spend $100 billion and build a couple of in a couple of stages. They were going to build a chip fab plant or near Syracuse in the middle in Clay, New York, at the middle.
Clay, New York.
In the middle.
It's going up.
I know it took a couple of years to get started, but so I went out and visited the field where they were doing test drillings and so on and so forth. But that was just part of the whole story of what was happening up there, and some of this was just foundations that had been set because of natural resources, foundations that had been set because of education. Rockefeller in the 70s wanted to build a state university system that was competitive with University of California, and he did. He began it. And now it seems like every 5 miles there's a sign for either a state university campus, a state college campus, or some state research facility related to one or the other. And it just, I was gobsmacked. So what was causing, nobody knew about this stuff. You would ask people in Utica, well, what's happening up the river, or above the river, above the Mohawk? And they'd say, oh, there's some plant up there. Well, yeah, And you'd go wander around Utica, and you'd see people buying properties, beautiful, beautiful old houses, fixing them up, making really doing an astounding job for a city that was in worse than in the doldrums. It was below the doldrums. It was dangerous as hell, and it's now got, I don't know, 40 different ethnic groups and languages are in Utica. The people who are fixing up their houses, they can go next door and get a master craftsman who'll come over, who lives next door. Okay. People are moving there from elsewhere. And then with climate change, because I was driving along the Finger Lakes, it goes on and
Oh,
on. The
Julian,
Finger
before
Lakes,
you move on, hold on a second. I just want to butt in for a second. We
sure.
have Julia, our friend Julia Tenney, who actually helps us with the podcast, grew up in Utica, and she typed in the comments here, Utica was known as Sin City in the 40s and 50s. So
Yeah.
she's, and I think she's pleased that we are talking about her hometown
Yeah.
because
The
often
other,
nobody does.
right. And the other thing about the wonderful thing about, well, this is an Edmund Wilson comment. He was very, very disappointed. This was in the 60s because he used to shop. He would drive in from Talcottville to downtown Utica, and there were a couple of stores that sold caviar, and they no longer sold caviar. And to him, that was the decline of civilization.
That's right. You can't get my caviar sandwich in Utica anymore.
That's it. It's over.
Right. I mean, this he was a bit of a bit pompous. He was a libertarian. He didn't believe in paying his taxes when they were being used for war, so he didn't pay his taxes. He actually ended up in federal court in Utica, and the judge told him that either he had to come up with $7,500 or he was going to go to jail. So he decided that it was worth coming up with $7,500 that he didn't really have at that moment in cash, small unmarked bills. So he borrowed it from friends and then paid them back by selling his papers to the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale. Uh, all these wonderful connections. But so driving down along the lakes, along the Finger Lakes, where that I had visited back when I had gone back to Rochester for a couple of years for neurology training. And there were wineries, and they were producing swill that you could drink, but you didn't really want to drink a lot of. But then a winemaker by the name of Konstantin Frank had come from, I think, Ukraine, and had reintroduced Riesling grapes. And remember that upstate New York was cold in the winter, really cold.
Yeah,
So
it is.
yeah, I mean there were no parkas for grapes.
Right.
Nobody has ever produced a parka for a grape or a grapevine.
Yeah.
So you had to grow hardy grapes, and the hardy grapes are hardy, but they don't taste good.
Right.
Even if you add a lot of sugar, the way Manischewitz did. But what had happened, and I remember those grapes, and I remember that wine. And it didn't win. The only award it won was in my memory of "Don't drink it." But there are now 300 vineyards along the various Finger Lakes. Some of them are producing wines that are reliably and repeatedly winning awards. And who's coming over to buy the vineyards up? Californians. Why? Because I went to a couple of wineries. One of them explained what they were doing, and they were very open about it. They're very worried about the Northern California, particularly Northern California climate, with the reliable, repeatable, frequent, prolonged fires, forest fires, that produce smoke that doesn't just coat your grapes when they're about to be harvested. It coats your soil. It sinks into the soil. So the treasured terroir of California is turning into a toxic waste dump.
Hmm.
in their mind. And some of these areas are going to be in the years to come are going to be unworkable as premier wine growing areas
Because the grapes are reabsorbed into the soil.
because the grapes have their toes in toxic wastes
Oh, 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 oh.
from all the repeated fires, smoke, debris, the asbestos and the acetate and the God knows what that's coming out of nice people's homes, along with the wood that's burning. But so the Californians are buying up the Finger Lakes.
Hmm.
Sure.
Oh my God!
But so, and Julia does also comment, and I hope you don't mind, but she is from the
No,
area. Julia
yeah,
is saying that one of the problems with the grapes is the soil is too rich, and in California, it's sandier. That there's actually less nutrients in the soil, so that's why the grapes are so sweet and why they don't really make a dry wine.
they
Um,
actually do make a dry. They
do
make
they?
superb dry wines, absolutely, and some of them are using older techniques like the in the amphoras. There's one
Oh yeah.
winery that particularly I think is I forget the name of it, but I visited them and took a picture of their storage area, and they're using amphoras and
Oh, right.
similar aging techniques. There are a number of vineyards that are producing really stellar wines. I mean, they may not be a classic Chardonnay that you would think of. Thank God it's not a California oaky Chardonnay.
Another
They're,
Chardonnay.
they're producing French Chardonnays that are
Mm.
very, very distinctive and dry and interesting. So you really need to the day of the sweet wine is over there.
Hmm. So, and I should tell the listeners, and I should have said this at the top. You can follow along with some of the photographs. It's not that we're not going in chronological order with the whole slideshow. You can read the whole thing and see the whole thing, but it's at VZUL, like visual.com, and then click on the past is future, and then you can kind of take a look at the photography and read more detail about what Julian's talking about.
So the story actually has you can slice this tale many ways because part of it is technology, part of it is agriculture, part of it is food, part of it is quality of life. Urban, and extra urban, towns that were in decay that are now unaffordable. Hudson River, the river valley towns. Some of it is part of the story is the recreation, the nature and the recreation. The Adirondacks has 6 million acres. A
Mhm.
good a third of it is absolutely protected and preserved. You can't do a thing to it. Another, probably almost a third, is protected and you can do some things. And the rest of it is managed or is owned privately, but is overseen vaguely, not so vaguely. You don't try anything with the Adirondack Park Authority. And for years, everybody there hated the PA because the PA said, you can't do that, can't do that. But they ended up protecting and preserving this 6 million. It's the largest wilderness area east of the Mississippi, and it's larger than many of the western parks. The national parks.
Can I jump in for a second because
Sure.
you triggered something in my mind because I watched another, and what's fascinating is that there's all kinds of this conversation goes in a million different directions. But just today, by luck, one of my favorite YouTube guys is a guy who does practical engineering. He's a civil engineer, and he talks very, very in a very matter of fact way about various engineering things. And he was talking about what goes on underneath the street in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like underneath the streets of Manhattan with all the utility things? And part of that, he spent a lot of time talking about the water system. And he says, as most people know, New York City has one of the most amazing water supply systems. The water it doesn't have to be treated at all. They still treat it a little bit just to be on the safe side, but it doesn't need to be treated. It comes from the Adirondacks, and he said and what that means, he says, and also what people don't know is that watershed that supplies the water supply to New York City is unbelievably protected. Like an enormous amount of resources are put into making sure that nothing gets into that watershed at all, that nothing pollutes it or contaminates it, which is an interesting, unintended consequences. You do this thing to supply a big city, and all of a sudden, one of the consequences, it's almost like Chernobyl. It's like Chernobyl's been one of the greatest resurgences of wild European animals and
Right.
birds and stuff like that. And it's the same thing with the Adirondacks. And that's why it's very hard
And the
when people
Catskills too. Yeah, the Catskills.
Yeah.
and the whole thing is, and just to wrap it up, is the thing is, people say, how do we duplicate this? How do we make this happen? And the answer is, it's really hard. There's a lot of things that have been taking place over hundreds of years that come together that make upstate New York what it is. And that's true of every region in America. There's a lot of things that took place back in 1700 that made Pennsylvania what it is, and that made California what it is. But I just thought that was fascinating about the whole water thing and about the Adirondacks and the recreational abilities. As you mentioned, I mean, your big overarching theme in your presentation is, where did this resurgence come from? And you identify a whole bunch of things, but I think one of the key things too, which I think you hint at, is that it's a beautiful place with a lot of natural beauty that's very easy for people to enjoy. If you like kayaking, you like biking and stuff like that, it's gorgeous. So anyway, that's the end of my interjection.
And they've been very, very good. The state, not the PA, but the conservation and recreation people have been very good about putting limits on the use of trails, on the use of the water trails, on everything. So, I mean, I remember canoeing through the Fulton chain of lakes in the Adirondacks decades and decades ago, and that and the other lakes, Racket Lake, Long Lake, and so on, are still protected, still preserved, even though there are homes on them. But in terms of a water path, that is protected, and the number of people who can use it per week is controlled. You have to get a permit, only so many permits for the campsites, and it's become part of an enormous, I think, 700-mile water path. So it goes from Pennsylvania through New York up into the rest of New England, and with some carries here and there. But this, having these recreation resources, the Catskills, the Adirondack. The Catskills is more developed, but there's still large chunks of wilderness there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things going on in the Catskills. For instance, there's a trout farm that.
Was it Saranac area that you were that you focused on there, or was it?
Oh, that's in the middle of the Catskills. This trout farm, and it's a farm. The farmer was a farmer, just a land farmer, and he wanted to get into fish farming. So he owns not a large tract of land, but he owns the hill, the small mountain behind it. So that means he owns the spring at the top that comes down on his land that's protected, that feeds the tanks and the areas where he's growing not steelhead trout. It's a Western variety that he grows and for about maybe a year or so, and then fishes them out and sells them at farmers markets and to local restaurants. And it's an amazing little, not so little business. That and I think it's a steelhead trout farm near Hudson, New York, along the river, which is a big international project. It's owned by, I think, a Scottish corporation that took over an old manufacturing plant, and they churn out many trout. Uh, for what? For the New York market, the New York
Oh,
restaurant
of
market.
course. You got to have your smoked trout pate if you're going to have any kind of cocktail party in New York City.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's what you. So I mean, wherever you look, and then you realize that the temperatures are getting warmer,
Hmm.
the conditions are getting better, that you can do all this stuff, and the infrastructure is improving, and most important for a for a world that depends on knowledge and knowledge-based progress, New York is filled with people who have knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And whether it's private school, private colleges and universities or public, they've got them. They're all over the place. And they tend to attract people. There are opportunities for them to learn, produce, stay, work, and they stay and they work. It's a nice world to live in because it's getting better, and economically it's getting better, and you should want to buy a house, not necessarily in Utica, but maybe in one of the top 10 real estate markets persistently in the United States, which happens to be, and I nearly fell over when I read this, Rochester.
Yeah,
And
it's
why
funny.
Rochester? Well, Rochester used to have businesses that went away, but those businesses had to do with vision and optics. And it turns out that Rochester is the world center for research and development of vision, optics, and lasers.
Hmm.
And it's also from what I understand, it's at least the American capital for the deaf community too.
Yes, yeah,
You
yes.
did in part in your presentation. You had a thing about Imagine RIT Day. You went to Rochester
Oh, yeah.
Institute of Technology for Imagine Day, and I've spoken about this before. I went to Imagine Day, RIT Imagine, and I was like, okay, it's going to be a couple of like soda and baking acid volcanoes and a couple of posters on easels. I couldn't have been. I actually felt cheated that I could only spend a day there because it was so exciting. There's so many things going on. It's such an exciting campus. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And the other thing that was fascinating, not only is it such a hive of activity that really blew me away, but next to all the major speakers, there's somebody doing ASL. And it clicked in my head because I had a friend, Mike Metley, and I think in his family there is a genetic predisposition to early onset deafness, and I think some of his brothers and some of his family members moved to Rochester because it is considered the place for the deaf community in America. So yeah, it's Corning. It's Gallaudet, I think. Is that the name of the
No,
school?
no, Gallaudet is down in Washington, but the
Right,
National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTID,
right.
is on the RIT campus. And the RIT campus is actually, I think they have something like 40,000 undergraduates and graduate
It's
students.
amazing.
And they have campuses in Croatia and Dubai or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what they used to be, because I remember going there, attending a week long course. They were a technical photography and technical printing trade school.
Right, because wasn't Polaroid? Wasn't Polaroid in Rochester?
No, they were in Cambridge here. No, only it was Kodak.
It's Kodak. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But no, the competitor was in Cambridge, Mass. Was
Yeah,
Polaroid.
right on the Charles.
Yeah, and they hated each other, of course. And actually, I think Kodak did have an instant camera type of thing like Polaroid, but Polaroid won out. Theirs was better. Sadly, Kodak had I don't know if it was full frame digital camera like 25 years ago, long before It cost $25,000. That was a problem.
Well,
So
yeah,
they didn't sell a lot of them compared to the $100 Instamatics.
right.
And they had all the patents for digital photography, and they messed up with them. They just didn't do anything with them, didn't develop them, didn't market them, didn't sell them off. Um, so anyway, there's so many areas in the state that are, and it's if you walk around and tell people, oh, oh, really? Yes, it's just down the road. Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
They're really amazed that their own neighborhood is busy popping, and it is. And whether you're driving along the Hudson River, um, and looking at food or art or houses or whatever, or I mean, that's a center of creativity, and the art community. It's affectionately referred to as Nobro, North Brooklyn, because all the creative types from Brooklyn decided they wanted a better life, and they moved up the river to the river towns where they have a better life and more space, and it's cheaper. And they're
Yeah,
much
I know a couple who moved from in a roundabout way from Williamsburg to Brooklyn to Rochester eventually, stopping in Asheville for a while.
right.
And they love Rochester. And as a New Yorker originally, that is mind-boggling to me, because there is and actually Julia was saying in the chat that there is some enmity between upstate New York and New York City, because New York City takes all the water and sends all the trash, and for a while, the homeless people. So
Right.
we have not always got along well. So it's interesting, actually, that a lot of the people that made New York City are moving to the towns, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica. I think eventually will be one of those towns as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So and really it's a story about climate change, and that's what's so fascinating. And it's all part of what Abram Lustgarten writes about in his book On the Move that came out 2 years ago. He talks about how the entire north of the U.S. is going to be the beneficiary. Could well be the beneficiary of climate change 10 to 30 years down the line. And I think he's dead wrong. I don't think it's 10 to 30. I'll say now to 10. Because the effects of climate change are being felt in the South in many ways, and the opportunities. People who were so eager to sell their house in New Jersey and get $1 million for it, or get $800,000 for their house in somewhere New Jersey, and move to Florida and have the good life, or move to the Carolinas. When it comes time to turn around and they looking for jobs and they've got to come back to upstate New York, the house that they spent, let's say, $1 million on down there, or 800,000, they won't be able to get that money back out. And the house that they sold for $1 million in New Jersey, or the equivalent of in upstate, won't be available for $1 million. It'll be a lot more.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah.
This is who could predict this? Nobody could have predicted. Nobody could predict that climate change would have been as extreme as it is showing itself to be. And nobody could have pulled all these threads together about utility costs and recreation benefits and education opportunities, to put this picture together the way it is beginning to come together all through upstate. It's really it's a fascinating story. So, I mean, yeah, they do still have snow. The snow is not going to go away, but these storms that you read about in Buffalo that used to be, when I was small, used to be horrible and extensive and extended, and they would extend way east. Now, with the lake effect snow, which is more extreme, but it's narrower, it focuses on the part of Buffalo that's right on the lake. The rest of it, when you come east to Rochester and further, the snow volumes decrease much less. The storms are less extreme, and that's going to continue to be the case. So it makes it a more livable upstate.
Right, because mostly people complain about the cold, I suppose. Right, or they used to complain about the cold, or that's why
Well,
you wouldn't want to live
yeah,
there.
the cold and the snow. The snow is less. The cold is still there, but
Yeah.
it's less and less extreme, and it's going to be even less extreme over as time goes on.
And speaking from personal experience, because I live in Syracuse,
Yeah,
and I moved here from Texas in 2023.
yeah,
And I could go on for hours, but one of there's several reasons why I relocated here. One, obviously, is my daughter was going to go to Syracuse University. That was a big incentive.
yeah,
Also, but also when I came up here, it was like, this place is beautiful. This neighborhood is beautiful. This house is perfectly fine for me, and it's 220 grand. That's a wave of the hand.
yes,
They've got an infrastructure, they've got a bus system. I have a park next to me, I have a co-op. And did I mention it's beautiful? Like when you come here in autumn, it's mind-blowingly beautiful. And so all that, and also I was thinking about climate change. I was thinking about I want to be a place where there's like a lot of water.
right,
Because when you live in Texas for a while, it hits you. Like every summer, they're like, we're under advisory level 4. You can't water your lawn. Well, my lawn's already dead, so we're good on that one. No point in watering because it got incinerated a month ago.
right.
So yeah, you get a sense of that, and you come up here. But I think there's one other interesting factor, which is the weathers can still be brutal. The winters, the last winter we had was hellacious. It was really cold, but in the post, I think one of the reasons why people hate winters traditionally is every morning they had to get in their car and drive to work. And that really sucks when everything's frozen and everything's been refrozen 15 times. But I work 100% from home. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's really cold outside. It kind of sucks, but it's not really ruining my day. I don't hate it like you'd hate it if you're constantly spinning out in your car or constantly hitting out, or your car's rotting out from all the ice and all
Or
the
you're
snow
shoveling.
on it
Yeah,
and
shoveling.
things like that. So it's interesting how these things. I think it's just so difficult to detangle all the threads that lead here. But I think the pandemic is one thread that sort of leads into that, and yeah, and all that stuff. But at home prices, I was absolutely flabbergasted that I could have a lovely house in a good neighborhood for 220 grand. My
Yeah,
God.
and more industries are beginning to find this as a good place to be because they can get educated people. One of the problems in Phoenix with the TMSC chip fab plant is they had to bring people from Taiwan to install the plant, and they have to some degree, they have to bring people from Taiwan to run the plant.
Mhm.
There aren't enough educated people in Phoenix, Arizona, to work in a chip fab plant. Um, another chip fab story from the Wolfspeed plant north of Utica and Marcy is that even the sweepers, the people who sweep the floor to keep the dust down, no dust, they're making $83,000. Well,
Mhm.
83,000 for a cleaner in Utica lets you buy a pretty nice house,
Two of them.
two of them or three of them, and then and you're investing. You're a real estate investor as a sweeper at a chip fab plant,
Yeah.
and so that all of that is it's unbelievable, but it's believable, and so there is now caviar in Utica.
Yes.
There's caviar in lots of places. And there's wine that's of the highest quality, And the agriculture is being overseen by the nice people at Cornell Agritech in Geneva, New York, where they're doing all sorts of advanced research. They've got a robot that wanders through the fields. They've developed wanders through the fields, through the vineyards, and all at once it looks at the condition of the grapes. Are they ready to pick? And are they healthy? Looks at the condition of the vine. Does it have diseases? Does it need something? And it samples the soil. It transmits those three sets of data up to the cloud, up to a satellite, where you can plan and program the management of that vineyard microscopically as to what to do. This is one of the Cornell Agritech Gee Whiz toys that they've developed. And so there's a lot of that. The grapes were actually modified. They're California varietals, but they were slightly tweaked by the folks at Agritech 10 years ago. So they're not strictly straight out of the ground California, but they're very close. Anyway, so I mean, there are lots of stories. It goes on and on and on, and the Center for Culinary Education. Where is it? It's along the Hudson. It's the Culinary Institute of America, which is funded by most major hotel and hospitality chains. It's where they get their next generation of managers, not just chefs. They get the managers for their hotel operations, which of course dovetails with the Cornell School of Hotel Management.
Right.
It goes on and on and on, and you tie all the threads together, and you've got a pretty big ball of thread.
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing tying. I'm sorry. Do you want to say something?
No. I was just going to talk about the different. I was going to bring up the difference between the Hudson Valley and the string of towns from Albany to Buffalo. But like as Julian is pointing out, there is more of a connection there than I think there was in the past. Because yes, the Hudson Valley was always like a feeder. People from New York City would go and get away, and they'd buy a cabin or something like that. But it's changing. I think the nature of it is changing, and I'm noticing it just from friends that I'm talking to in both of those areas. But please go ahead. So I rattled through my thought process.
Well, there's two things. There's two books. You've probably read, Julian, but your thing makes me think of two books. One was a big surprise to me. Was a canal boatman. I don't know if you've ever seen this book. It's written by the guy who's one of the last people to work on the Erie Canal. And he, as a child, he was part of a barge family that worked the Erie Canal. And it's a very beautiful, very humble. It's just him talking in a very plain language about what it was like to work the Erie Canal, like how you handled the donkeys and what were the different stores and what did you do with the drunks. It's a very, and it's a wonderful book, a canal boatman. And it just shows you that the Erie Canal is like a whole world unto itself. It's a whole historical study in and of itself. But it was basically like this community. I don't know how long it is. It's like 400 miles, but it was like this nation that was 400 miles long and like 50 feet wide. And everybody up and down the canal knew each other. You didn't piss off the lockmaster. That was the key thing, because the lockmaster had the best gossip. And also they could also hold you up if they were angry with you. They could make you wait and spin your wheels for. It's very funny. It's a real trip down memory lane. But the more interesting book, because you talked about how the winemakers from California are coming back to upstate New York. Well, there's a book that Jim and I have talked about many times in this show called The Judgment of Paris, which was
the famous.
Have you read that one?
No, but I know about it. The famous
great book,
wine tasting. That showed that California wines were easily equal to what was in Europe, and so on and so forth. And now the upstate wines are proving themselves to be as good as some of them are as good as the California wines, and the sweetened garbage that came out of Hammondsport wineries is not being produced anymore, or
Yeah.
isn't selling, and that's so there. These are smaller wineries producing extraordinary wines.
But
Uh,
the thing I was getting at is that when you read the book about the guys who started back in the late 60s, like Stag's Leap and all that
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
um, Mondavi, the first generation of California winemakers were Italian winemakers who were making cheap, sweet red wine for the immigrant market in
right,
the 1920s and 30s. And then after World War II, the sons and daughters of the Italians went to college, and it wasn't cool anymore to drink the jug wine, as they called it, the jug
right,
wines. But Mondavi was still there. But these new guys come out in the late 1960s, and they're coming from Eastern Europe. Like you said, they're coming from all over the world. And there's this guy from Yugoslavia. I think he's one. He comes out here and he says, I'm going to make the best. I'm going to go toe to toe with the Frenchman.
Oh yeah, of
And
course.
he quickly realized, he says, the only problem is I knew absolutely nothing about how to grow wine. And there was there's three key components that made that thing happen. One, University of California Agricultural Extension at Merced. Two, the guys at Mondavi and these other first generation who are still there, and three, a really very California attitude of we all help each other. You need
right.
help you need help getting in your harvest. You need to borrow my tractor. You need some advice on how to do. Yeah, I've got some extra barrels. And everybody worked together. So when you talk about the SUNY system as a necessary ingredient for this, and there's been many revivals, I think, in upstate New York. I think you're absolutely right. It's the SUNY system is a really core ingredient of this thing.
Well, and you know, and you the Erie Canal story has many long history, many variations, and many layers of complexity and interest. It opened up New York State. It opened New York State to the west, in order to make certain that they had water later on for the canal to fill the locks. That was part of why they protected the Adirondacks, to
Hmm.
protect the water supply so that it would not be diverted or used so it would be always available
Huh.
for the Adirondack, for the canal supply, and
Interesting.
so on and so forth. So, that was the history. And I mean, it's a very complex history of how it grew, how it expanded, and then how transportation changed. Trains. You didn't need the canal because you had trains. And yeah, then trains came right along the canal and other directions. So that eliminated the efficacy of the canal as a commercial transport mode. And then the railroads fell off because you had something called airplanes.
Yeah.
So, and you could manufacture and take it out to Idlewild, John F. Kennedy International, or another airport, and of which there are many in upstate, and you could get things up and out. And once it's up at 38,000 feet, it really doesn't cost much, whether you're going to take it to Dubai or whether you're going to take it to Tokyo or whether you're going to take it to Dallas.
Hmm.
It's the loading it, the getting the plane ready, getting it up, getting it off, getting it up. Once it's up, whether it's going a couple hours or a couple hours more, doesn't make. So, but that's so upstate New York was a transportation core early on in the early 1800s, and then it became less so. So now we've revived it as a recreation hub,
Hmm.
and the entire canalway is a major multi-hundred-mile park,
Mhm.
and a couple of times a year there are groups of hundreds of cyclists who go end to end. It's a big
The
festival.
Empire Trail. Yeah, Jim and I did a part of it.
Right.
Or Jim
So
did a part of it.
No, we did a part. It was actually a fantastic ride, and we did talk about it in a different podcast. But now I want to get on the bike and I want to go drink wine. I want to do a bike tour of the Finger Lakes and stop at all the
yeah,
vineyards and
yeah,
find out for myself.
right.
Julian, I don't want to. I think we're kind of up against time, but can you tell us? I encourage people to go to visual.com and check out some of the other galleries, some of the other collections of photographs. You've been all around the world. There are photographs from Iran, Ethiopia, Colombia, Chile, Burma, Argentina, Spain, Tunisia, Sweden, etc. And so there's a lot to watch there and a lot to take in. I've noticed that consistently there's an economic element to a lot of what you shoot. And do you have a project in mind going forward? I'm cheating a little bit because we're talking about this on a walk that we took this morning. And I know that project maybe isn't going to get off the ground, but do you have any ideas for kind of what you want to shoot next and what story you want to tell?
Well, in a way, I don't. I had an idea. I'm not sure it's going to work out. I don't really have a solid next project. I mean, this is my project with the past is future is to get it published. That's the major project is to find a publisher for it. And because the world of photojournalism has so changed, the world of photography has so changed, and it's something that I teach at the University of Virginia on photography, photojournalism, persuasion, and politics. And we used to look at magazines. We used to look at the evening news to find out what was happening, and now our photography, our photojournalism is Instagram, and that's about it. So it's a very strange world, and I'm not sure. I mean, even to get a book of photographs today published is a challenge because publishers don't want to publish books of photographs because it costs more to print and nobody wants to buy them for their house anymore, for their coffee table, because they don't have coffee tables. So, I mean, I'm not sure quite what I want to shoot next. Jim, you and I had talked about a notion I had about Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations book to see about photographing against that, which would be a real challenge. But I'm not sure. I'm happy that this is up on the web. I'll be happier if it goes to print somewhere at some point, and if people go up and discover what I discovered and enjoy, because this is going to affect positively not just upstate New York. It's going to affect Pennsylvania, Ohio, Upper Midwest, as Lustgarten points out, New England. All of these areas of the North are going to be the beneficiaries, sadly, of climate change.
Yeah. At least for a while, or maybe for long term, if we can slow it down
for a long time until we manage to eliminate ourselves from the earth.
That is the note to end on. That is a happy note.
Right.
Julian Fisher, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us. This is a fascinating project that you're working on. It is a book. It is, I think in kind of not its final book form, but in a form, it is online to view. And the website is vzul.com. Once again, thanks so much for spending time with us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Funny Not Funny is produced by Jim Infantino at Slab Media in Boston. Jim Infantino and Lionel Casson are the co-hosts. Our website is funnynotfunny.net. The theme music is from the song Wheel from the album Utopia Revisited by Jim. The opinions presented by the co-hosts are ridiculous and should not be taken seriously by anyone. Our intended audience is literally nobody. If you're listening to this podcast, you should probably pause to reflect on other choices you've recently made. Please do not subscribe or leave a rating or review. It only encourages us to make more. Thanks for listening.